172 people already, and we've just started. Everyone joining, good to see the familiar names.
Welcome. I'm just gonna have to sit there and click and let everyone in the whole time through, it looks like.
Doing the important work, Ian.
Amazing. And so glad to have everyone here for the first day of Climate Career Week, which is really exciting. We've got events all week. This is our second one. Let's keep letting people in. And if you want to share your screen, Eugene, we can get going. Kind of how today's going to work for resources overview on your climate career. We've got a couple amazing speakers. They're going to each sort of have 5 to 10 minute sort of presentations on some of the resources that they like directly have helped out with. They'll share some of their favorite resources generally in the climate ecosystem as well, and kind of what helped them when they started their own climate journey. And at the end, we'll have a Q&A. Feel free to ask questions all throughout. We won't probably get to them until the end. But if you could use the Q&A box down below, it's on the bottom of your Zoom window. That way it just keeps a little bit more order to the system. So that we can sort them out, because the comment section will be, I'm sure, rolling through the whole time. I'm just kind of curious, where is everyone from? Feel free to put it in the chat. Love to see it. People have been sharing their LinkedIn's down there as well. Feel free to toss your LinkedIn down there. Definitely location, San Francisco border. Oh, we got some international, UK, London. I love it. Very cool. All right, well, Germany. Singapore. Okay, cool. All right, Eugene, if you want to take us out and start with the presentation.
Sounds good. Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks again for joining this event, and thanks, of course, especially for your intention to get into a climate career. We need a lot more of you. There's almost 400 of you here, and we're gonna need several tens of thousands of times more than that. So this is a tiny part of what the climate workforce is yet to be, but you are at the forefront of it. So thank you. Thank you for doing that. So I'm Eugene. I run a nonprofit called Work on Climate, focused on building out the climate workforce equitably and justly. And I'm here to tell you a little bit about what we do that's most directly relevant to you. And then I'm also here to tell you quite a bit more about what we do more broadly, because I want to speak about the overall climate workforce problem and how we can solve it. First, a little bit about my personal background and how I got into it. I think some of you maybe already know this, but I was in big tech for a very long time. Most recently, 7 or 8 years at Google, and eventually, like probably many of you, I figured that I had enough of working on something that isn't climate, and left and found that there is a lot of people like myself. And I left together with a coworker who was in the same boat. And we ended up starting an online community for professionals that are seeking climate work. And that's what we have become most known for. The community has been incredibly helpful to thousands and thousands of people. It is now over 28,000 people. Several thousand of them actually found jobs and credited to the community. And according to our tentative estimates, probably dozens of people have started companies crediting it to the help of community programs. So a quick overview of what we actually do. So many people think that we just have a Slack workspace, but that's just a small part of what we have. We have mentorship programs where you can talk to experts in certain sectors of climate and come and say, hey, I'm a mechanical engineer, how can I work in your area? We have a peer mentorship program that we're currently scaling. It is initially starting on helping people help each other in regards to corporate climate action. We have all kinds of events and workshops that are more and more focused on upskilling now. We have resources for you, and yes, you can connect with other people like yourself and ask for help and offer help on our Slack. Now, what's coming soon is we're spinning up a couple of more targeted programs for super early stage founders, for people in finance adjacent roles, and for people in roles related to corporate climate action. So stay tuned for that. If one of these describes you and you're not in work on climate yet, then now is a good time to join. I'll say a few more words about whether work on climate is for you. I think there's a fair chance that it is, but really the criterion as to whether it really is for you is this is intended to be a true community. So if you're interested and available to not just shop around, but give twice what you take, and if you are in a mood for developing deep relationships and practicing skills, then work on climate is for you. But if you're simply looking for a job board, don't join work on climate. Go to a job board. We're not that good of a job board. We're a community, we're not a job board. So if you're just looking to post a job or browse jobs, use job boards. If you're looking for a true community and learn together with other people, practice together and be reciprocal, then yes, this is the right place. So this is what we offer for you. And this is what we're here to really do. What we're really here to do is to solve the climate talent crisis overall. And you may wonder, what climate talent crisis? Aren't there 500 of us on this call alone itching to join the climate workforce? Isn't that enough? And that's not enough. We need several 100 million people. And we need several 100 million people in all kinds of roles, from HVAC installers to circular economy experts to electricians to carbon accountants and so on. And a lot of the money, not all of the money, but a lot of the money to pay these people is here. But up until now, almost all of the investment in climate has been in just funding alone and physical infrastructure, but not human capital infrastructure. And we need to fix that because otherwise we won't have the people to build this. And this is a very big problem and a very different one than probably what many of you are facing here today. Most of you here are probably motivated to find a new job at a climate company. And this is it has to start here. You are the first wave of the people who will make this workforce. But the full problem is much, much bigger and much, much more diverse. And it's quite different from this problem. So here I have a few, spicy takes of my own in regards to what the workforce will actually look like. And you can see it. So most of you are motivated for a climate job, but most of the work, ultimately, most of those hundreds of millions of people will be motivated by it just being a good job, not by climate. Most of you want to just find what is the right job. But really, most of the problem that we have to solve is upskilling the existing workforce in existing roles. It's finding workers in areas where there simply are not enough workers with the right skills. It's pulling off this transition in a way that is just and inclusive and does not make existing inequities worse and further destabilize our society in the middle of us trying to pull off the greatest economic transition in history. Most of you are probably looking for a new job, but most of the work ultimately will be done as part of non-climate jobs. And most of it will probably be done by companies that have the massive power to reshape the full economy. And it will be done with the help of innovation from climate startups. And some of them will become really big. But most of the work will be done by companies that have the power, at least in the coming decade. So it's quite a different problem pulling all of this off. And that's the problem that we're really here to solve. So in order to solve this problem at this scale, we can't limit our work to helping people who are actively looking for climate work. We need to be changing the systems that shape the workforce in the first place. Because if you look at what these systems look like, for example, if you consider the systems that participate in the career path of an AI professional, you will notice that the typical career path is nothing like what it needs to be to create a workforce of the future for the clean economy. People are not taught the necessary skills. They're not being made aware of these opportunities. They don't hang out with people who can help them integrate into that economy and so on. And we need to change that. So how are we doing that? Well, we have a couple of approaches to that, but broadly they fall into two buckets. One is creating bottom-up change in the talent ecosystem, which is primarily change in different professional communities. And the other is, and for that, we can leverage the work on climate community, and I'll say a little bit about that in a second. And the other approach is creating change in the more like top-down bodies that have a lot of power and are heavyweight and slow to move and require a special approach, which is changing the way that schools operate, accreditors operate, government agencies operate, and so on, and helping them adapt, embrace the workforce change that's coming. So a little more detail about how we're doing this, and essentially our roadmap for creating those bottom-up pathways into climate roles and skills. We have already built a powerful community that is here to help all of you. And the next step for us is to take the community to the next level and make it into a community of practice rather than primarily a community of connection. And I mentioned that we're doing that for several key types of roles. We're creating upskilling programs and skill mentorship programs and creating learning groups that will help people co-create new knowledge together. And where this is really going is that by 2025, we should get ready to begin deploying this new knowledge and these new leaders of these fields that appear in the community, deploying all of this into non-climate communities. And what that might look like is, for example, through our founders program, perhaps we might help people learn how to create impactful business models in the food waste space. And then the next step in 2025 will be to start taking this to food-focused accelerators, to networks of entrepreneurship programs, and so on. So basically making it so that work on climate would have been unnecessary in the first place. So that's our approach in the community front. And I think all kinds of communities related to climate should be doing this work. It shouldn't be just us. This is the only way to make our work scalable, I believe. And on the front of pure ecosystem development and working with these heavyweight stakeholders like schools, accreditors, economic developers, professional associations, accelerators, and so on, government bodies, this part of our work is not very known, but this is really important. So in 2023, we launched our first effort to create these kind of cross-sector pilot talent pipelines that we don't participate in. This is not a way to get more people into work on climate. This is a way to make more people that go through schools and so on get into climate work and have the necessary skills. So in 2023, we launched the first regional pilot of this approach that is focused on the STEM talent pipeline into climate in the New York tri-state area. And it's a powerful industry working group made of universities, government bodies, professional associations, and so on. And over the next 10 months, this group will work together with our facilitation and create these new talent pipelines. So that's part of our plan for 2024. The other part of our plan is to do another working group that's similar to that and is focused on upskilling for small to medium businesses in Justice 40 areas. This way, kind of uplifting the workers in those most affected areas to become leaders of this new economy. And this is all going towards our plans for 2025, which would be around scaling this work nationally and internationally through creating industry bodies specifically designed to scale what we learn. So I'll stop here. This is what we're up to. And Jan, back to you.
Amazing. Thank you, Eugene. Cool. And one more reminder, we'll have a Q&A at the end. If you, there's too many things going on in the chat for me to keep track of, so make sure that if you have questions that you want answered, put them in the Q&A feature in Zoom. It's on the bottom of your Zoom window down below. Anshuman, are you ready to talk really briefly about some of the climate career resources that you sit within and some of your favorites?
Absolutely. Thank you, Ian. And I'm seeing a stream of questions come in into the chat. Hopefully, we'll get a time to answer quite a few of those, especially around how challenging it has been to find new jobs in climate right now in this environment. So hopefully between me, Jonathan, and Ian, and we'll address some of that. So just, I had a few slides as well, but before I jump into that, just a quick backstory. So I and Eugene, in some ways, share background in the sense that we were also outside of climate a few years ago, like a lot of us here, and very firmly find ourselves within this space. And you can also see a pattern, which is that both of us were trying to figure out how to get into climate, didn't find a great answer allowed us to get into climate, but also hopefully to pull in others. You'll see a similar story with Jonathan as well when he comes in later. So I think there's a signal there about kind of carving our own path, even if not all of that turns out to be jobs that are already out there. So let me just, I have a few slides that I'll share as well. So let me see if I can move to that. Okay. Yeah, so the company that I co-founded with two of my co-founders about 4 years ago is Terra.do, and we think of ourselves as the climate university for the world. And I'll talk a little bit more about what that means. But the mission is shared by Eugene, which is to get 100 million people working in climate. And when I say working in, it's not just finding new jobs, but also bringing climate to the work that you already do, which is applicable for all of us. So so what do we do? So this is a very busy slide. I'll just go 1, 2, 3 quickly, but don't worry too much about trying to read this slide, but it starts out with learning programs. So our theory of change is that we get a lot of people who are looking to transition into climate work or bring they already
no worries.
Okay, thanks. through the learning programs that we create, and these are meant for busy professionals. These are meant to fit into your daily schedules. These programs are run by some of the top climate experts in the world, and I'll show a few of them. And they cover everything under the climate sun. These programs then graduate all these alumni who go out into the world, bringing climate to what they do, and create this sense of community around all things climate. And then that in turn attracts both employers who are looking to hire, but also existing employers who want to take their employees and get them deeper into climate careers. And that powers this whole flywheel. I think we run some of the world's best climate learning programs. So on the left, you see the program that we are most well known for. It's our climate boot camp. It's called Learning for Action. It runs every 6 weeks. The next one is coming up in just a couple of weeks' time. It's a 12-week program that is to specific solutions and so on. And we have graduated 3,000 plus people from across these different programs. But on the right, you also see a bunch of different programs. So everything from supply chain decarbonization to ESG essentials to a farm school where you actually get to live on a regenerative farm for a week out of those 4 weeks of the program. So we run all these different programs, some of the top experts in the world, live programs, and with I would say a very high quality learning outcomes from each of those. And I think this is the part which is most exciting. And I think Eugene, Jonathan, we've kind of all intersected with each other, worked with each other in so many different ways. And think of this as a global resource for all of you, which is so we have a community of about 100,000 members. We have that are spread across 80 plus countries, and there are all these very nice, interesting organizations. And just like Eugene mentioned, we've had tons of people also start climate companies. Here are some examples of those companies that have started out, and they range on everything from not just carbon management, but water management, but also Project Eden, for example, which is building a new kind of alternative meat, and so on. So I think this is a very high quality community of people, all very, very action oriented. And we also ended up creating because it was very hard to discover a lot of these jobs, which are strewn across the entire world. So there are about 50,000 jobs on the Terra platform and about 700 employers that often hire from Terra. And this is all in a single place in Terra.do. And I thought I was seeing a bunch of questions about, and Amara, I think I saw a question from you about technical product managers going into product management roles in climate. I don't have a very specific example. These stories are these outcomes that we track of where individuals have ended up from their starting point to their ending point. And within the community, you can find a lot of people who have made those transitions happen. I saw another question about customer success managers. I know specifically at least 2 people who have made that transition happen, and I'm sure there are many more. And I just wanted to call out one last thing, which is that climate roles. One of the things that we care a lot about deeply is how the nonprofit sector and the government sector, which are very, very important roles and levers for making climate action happen, how do we build capacity in those places as well? So we have incredible examples of individuals who've done those transformations happen. On the right, you see some examples of things that we're doing right now. So for example, for journalists, we have a free, our $2,000 program is entirely free for people who are working. So for example, there's a organization called IREX that has that builds capacity inside nonprofit organizations. We work with them to train their global fellows, and we have a bunch of such ongoing scholarship programs to get a lot more of the nonprofit sector inside climate. That's that's kind of back to our mission, which is to get 100 million people working in climate. And I will stop sharing. And Ian, back to you.
Amazing. Yeah. So many good resources. And once we, at the very start of the Q&A, this is your warning, I guess, Anshuman, but I'll ask you guys about sort of your top 3 resources around the ecosystem as well when we kick that off before we jump into the rest of the questions. And then, Jonathan, I'm looking for your, oh, there you are. There you go. And you unmuted.
Oh.
Up to you. Jonathan, he runs Climate Draft, and he'll talk a lot more about that. So love to hear.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Ian, for taking the lead on Climate Career Week this year and all the work you've done. And thanks, Eugene and Anshuman, for participating. Thank all of you for being here. I'm going to put in the chat. Shortcutting a little bit, there's a resource hub on Climate Career Week on the website, and also saw a lot of people posting from cities where we're going to have meetups this week, which a number of the teams in the Work on Climate community and the Terra community have been putting together meetups. I think we're 18 cities around the world, including Delhi, London, Los Angeles, Denver. So please, I put the link in the chat. It's probably already scrolled way up. But go to climatecareerweek.org, click the meetups button, and see if there's one near you that you can attend this week, because it seems like people are excited to connect. I'm Jonathan Strauss, co-founder of Climate Draft. Climate Draft is actually a little different from WACL, Work on Climate, and Terra, in that we're exclusively focused on venture-backed climate tech. And we're one of the reasons why we, from the start, have always partnered very closely with these other great organizations, is that we recognize that venture-backed climate tech is a very small slice of what what needs to happen to decarbonize our global economy. But we think it's a pretty important one. And in terms of the broader ecosystem, right? You've got established companies, more established companies that are focused on clean energy or electric vehicles or things like that. You've got large corporates where this is kind of the every job's a climate job. And we have, as I think Eugene alluded to, and there's a session actually on the agenda for this week on Thursday. There's a Work on Climate session with Drew Wilkinson from Microsoft, formerly of Microsoft, talking about how corporate, working at a big company, you don't have to work at your own, you don't have to work at a climate company to have a climate impact in your work. And then, of course, there's nonprofits and all kinds of other ways that your work can have a climate impact. And so we are very much conscious that we're just one small piece of the puzzle. But the reason that we're focused on venture-backed climate tech is because we think that some of the most inspiring and exciting solutions are coming out of this world. And this is everything from nuclear fusion to new heat pumps and efficiency technologies to carbon capture and all kinds of things, and adaptation technologies. So the way that we look at what climate tech startups are doing is they're developing the technologies that can hopefully change the relationship between sustainability and abundance, right? Historically, we've looked at things where, in order to be sustainable, we had to cut back on things. And the really cool thing about a lot of the technologies that are coming out of these startups is that they're changing that dynamic. Improving your quality of life doesn't have to be at odds with improving the sustainability of your life and reducing your footprint. And so we see that with electric vehicles, we see that with heat pumps and many other technologies where increasingly the better, faster, cheaper solutions also happen to be the greener and more sustainable solutions. And so that's a decades-long cycle and of just bringing those technologies to market. These companies are a relatively small component of the workforce needs right now. For example, I think Anshuman mentioned there's over 50,000 jobs on the Terra.do job board, which is much more comprehensive. In our universe of venture-backed climate tech startups, we've got 6,000 jobs, right? But those companies are playing a really important role, and we want to help them get access to the talent, capital, and customers that they need to grow. And so a lot of what we do is kind of movement building, helping to put on events like this and just raise awareness of what's happening in the space. And that includes, evangelizing the career opportunities that are out there. I think one of the things that Eugene touched on is, that the supply and demand for climate jobs, and, folks are talking about this in the chat, is pretty uneven right now. There's some areas in which if you want to go work at a company that is specifically focused on climate, there's probably more folks applying for those jobs, for some of those jobs, than there are spaces. And then in other areas, they are struggling to find talent. And so that creates frustration for folks. I think I know I can speak to my challenges as a job seeker, and like Anshuman referenced, part of the origin story of Climate Draft was I was kind of creating the job fair I wanted to participate in, and ended up backfiring because I didn't actually get a job. I ended up creating a job. But I want to be very clear and empathetic that and echo what Eugene said earlier, just thanking everybody who's here for wanting to commit yourselves to working on climate solutions, because career transition in general is difficult, and career transition into an evolving and emerging space is especially difficult. And we're here, and everybody who's participating in Climate Career Week is here to help offer resources and guidance and community, but there is no magic bullet. And sometimes these things are just challenging. And so, I'm excited for the Q&A, and we're excited to provide resources this week and beyond. And ultimately, we're here to be supportive and just know what you all are going through, and grateful for it. And so, final plug for Climate Draft. We've got a weekly newsletter and also a talent directory that you can create a profile in that's discoverable to the hundreds of venture-backed climate tech startups in our network, as well as a job board, which is exclusively focused on venture-backed climate tech. And with that, I'll hand it back to Ian, and we can move into the Q&A.
Always got to find my buttons while doing all the different things. But fantastic and really great having both you guys. I guess, to start off with, what are some of your other resources that you would recommend in the climate tech or climate ecosystem for people looking for jobs? I found a lot of networking and a lot of help through MCJ back when I started, until I found the Terra.do community and starting to talk to people there. But what are some of your guys' favorites?
You go at Anshuman, do you want to lead, or?
I think my one of my favorites would be opendoorclimate.com. This is at EDF, defense fund, who many months back started putting together a list of people who were already working in climate and would be open to opening up their Calendlies for anyone to set up 15 to 30 minutes with them for mentoring and career support. And that list is now, last I checked, was about 1,500 people. And almost 600 of them have been working in climate for more than 5 years. It's an incredible resource. Opendoorclimate.com. Please, that would be my
I'm gonna take like a cop-out answer here because I'm gonna, Ian and I spent a fair amount of time putting together the resource hub on climatecareerweek.org, and one of the reasons that that we did it is because I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all answer, because everybody is in a different position, everybody's journey is different, everybody learns differently, everybody's circumstances are different. Some people are, trying to find a job right now. Some people are looking to understand the landscape and maybe look to transition into a new role in a couple of years, or, opportunistically. Some people want to take a course, some people want to volunteer, some people want to do none of the above. Open Door Climate, and also I think Work on Climate also offers expert office hours. Those are both resources that are noted on the Climate Career Week Resources Hub. There's also a number of Slack communities, if that's something, if you want another icon in your sidebar. Some people do, some people don't. There's newsletters, there's podcasts, there's videos. That's I think the really exciting thing about this space is how much energy, how much diversity of content and offerings. I saw a bunch of people putting courses in, air miners, voice, 1.5, in addition to Terra, obviously. That's something that we include in the Climate Draft newsletter each week, is like upcoming deadlines for various courses, because again, it depends what you're looking to do. And that's the cool thing, is that there's pretty much an approach for everyone that's available. The flip side of that is it's hard to navigate. And so that's a big part of kind of the Climate Draft approach, and that Climate Career Week is helping to espouse, is just making it accessible, and kind of being a front door that makes it easier to navigate. So that's a big part of the value we hope to drive.
100%. Yeah, no transition is the same, and everyone's going to different places as well. There's gonna be different resources for every community or every industry. And not everyone is necessarily looking for a job in climate. Some people, right, are trying to figure out how to try and change their current job into more of a climate job. As you said, we have some events later on this week focused on that as well. And also just like, activism or organizing or local action. There's no one path. So I think it's a very exciting industry and field because of that. I was looking at, it seems like we have a sort of our top upvoted Q&A question would be from Amanda Potts. And she's wondering, so she's open to an internship role, but am seen as overqualified, coming from another sector. What is the best way to position my experience to employers so they will be open to someone who is in a transition?
Yeah, I think this is I'm happy to kind of take that first. So Amanda, this is a very common challenge coming into Terra. I think the 2 or 3 approaches that are a combination that I think might be interesting to explore. One is what I would call signaling, which is how do you signal that you are truly interested in working in this space? And that's a combination of, you could signal that by, for example, taking one of these many different programs that suggest that you're kind of deep diving into the being present in the many networking things that happen all the time, both online and in person across these different cities. So that's one. I think second is also skill acquisition specifically, which is, I think the climate space is very vast. And I know that not all of us have necessarily already decided what's the sweet spot for you, for each of us. However, still identifying one or two things that match closest to the functional skill and identifying a company or two or an organization or two and having essentially informational interviews with them and then using that to acquire a specific skill might be another path. And I think the third one is just that this is I think for a lot of this is in some ways this is one of the most challenging times to be finding a job in climate, and I'll tell you why. Which is not just because this sector is primarily booting up right, amazing companies, but they're still sub $1 billion companies, most of them, and therefore they have a few people they need to hire. On top of that, we've had a bunch of layoffs in the overall tech industry as well. And I don't know where you're based out of, but that might be another angle where you have a lot of people who are potentially looking for new jobs. But the third one is also that this is a space which a lot of us are actually here, not just because we think it's the place where we can make the most money, and maybe we can, but we truly find meaning and passion. And therefore, you have a large number of people who are trying to apply for a few of these new roles. My recommendation would be to, first of all, become part of these networks and communities, whether it's My Climate Journey, Terra, Work on Climate, et cetera, et cetera. You'll start encountering all these people, and you might encounter one or two places where there's an opportunity to build a project or a portfolio with someone else in that community that is directly relevant to the work that you've done in the past. It's it's 4 or 5 different things that you kind of have to put together to be able to seek that out right now. That's the good side of that is that in the process you'll discover the right collaborators and the right problem that you really feel excited about working on. The flip side is, of course, is that it takes longer. It's not as straight and narrow as it would have been for a traditional job in any other sector.
Yeah, I mean, echoing that specifically, what Anshuman said about the space, climate tech, especially in general, but climate careers, climate tech specifically, and then climate careers more broadly, being, still an emerging space and just the lopsidedness. I remember when we did Climate Career Week last year in January, the week immediately before, Google had laid off 30,000 people in 1 week, right? The scope of the transformation in some of these other legacy industries, the sheer scale of it dwarfs anything that, the entire size of, I think probably all of climate tech maybe is 30,000 employees, right? Not open roles, like all of these companies, including some of the biggest ones. So I think there's just a very, depending on what your skills and experience are and what you're looking to do, there can very much just be a oversupply of folks with similar skill sets relative to a very small number of open roles. And so what that leads a lot of people, including and here I can speak from personal experience, in a few years ago when I was trying to get into this space, I was one of those people who, like Amanda and like many of you, was willing to do jobs that would theoretically be beneath my level, or my experience level, take a pay cut, do generalist things that were outside of my core skill set, because I was so passionate about the idea of working in climate, and I really just wanted to get my foot in the door, and figured like the best way to start is to start, and ran into a lot of dead ends that way, and it was disheartening for sure. And I think now that I have a perspective, from working with companies and understanding a little bit more as an employer, I don't think it's necessarily right or fair, but I can understand why those dynamics happen, right? When somebody puts an internship role up, they have a level in mind, right? And it's not just like, I want, there's a movie with, I think it's Robert De Niro and I can't remember who the female lead is, but he's a retiree intern, But it's like that only happens really in movies. People want, it's like when somebody writes a job description, they have a profile in mind for what they're looking for. And even if you could come in and crush that job, it's very difficult to just convince people to think outside of, in general, right? Like it's very difficult to convince people to think outside of the box that they're already in. And it doesn't mean it's not possible, but it's always going to be an uphill battle if you're trying to cast yourself into a role that is not what you're necessarily an exact fit for. And that doesn't mean it's not worth doing. It definitely is a testament to your commitment to the space, which I think a lot of people and employers and hiring managers value. But you have to understand also that like a lot depends on the nature of the company and the role that you're talking to. But when you're working with a recruiter, recruiters have zero agency, right? They're given a job description, and their job is to basically present candidates to the hiring team that match that. Even hiring managers that are, several layers down, like they've got that job description approved. This is what they've got to stick to. If you're talking to early stage startups and you can talk to a founder, directly, that's when there's some creativity and flexibility, and they're going to say, oh yeah, we wrote this job description this way, but I could see how, you could be better for that. But I think it's just important to note that like the circumstances of the companies that, you're applying for and the role, and just recognizing that doesn't mean it's not worth playing a long shot, but recognizing that it can be a long shot, and also valuing yourself and positioning yourself in a way where you're holding out for the thing that is at your level, does play to your core skills, even if you do have the commitment and willingness to go outside of that.
Amazing. Yeah. We have this question from Jason. He's saying, so it sounds like there's some, he's hearing sort of conflicting things. And I think in the last session within itself, and with this session within itself as well, right, where we talk about there's an oversupply of people looking into trying to get into climate careers, but we still need more people working in climate, and the industry needs more people. And so how do you parse those two sort of contradictory statements?
Yeah, no, it's 100%. And thank you for asking that question. In fact, this is a bit of the arc that Terra itself as a company that we went through over the past 4 years. We were very focused on people who were transitioning into climate. And so a lot of us who are on this call right now who are moving from a job which is outside climate and trying to find a job in the climate sector, often in climate tech. And a combination of two things. One is this supply demand kind of a gap that we saw. But second, this 9 out of 10 climate jobs in 2030 would actually be existing jobs that people already have, but with a climate lens on top of that. Now, what does that mean? It means that if you have a finance background, then you are maybe an ESG analyst, or at least have ESG skills to start reporting on through ESG financial ESG metrics as well. If you are supply chains and you know how to look for them and what they are. If you are a software engineer, then you're working to make sure that your cloud engineering, the models that you're building is such that it's actually it's more decarbonized than normal. And so on and on and on. So across the board, across every single job that you can imagine, our belief is that 9 out of 10 times you'll actually be in the same job, but you'll now have a climate skill or a sustainability. So a lot of my request to all of you is to go back and potentially examine your existing context and see if you can build that here. We've seen, for example, Project Drawdown has done a great job in identifying how every job is a climate job. And someone was joking with me the other day, well, a dentist is not a climate job, clearly. So I went back and asked ChatGPT if a dentist could be a climate job. And lo and behold, there are you can bring that into what you do as well. But I think in general, there's a lot of skill acquisition that the green economy needs that will require 100 million people to be applying their functional skills along with some green skill knowledge to the work that they do right now. So that might be another part instead of trying to find a completely new job altogether.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. And I think, again, thanks, Jason, for raising this. There's also the time scale, right? Like when there's the like how do things change first slowly, then all at once. And I think that when Work on Climate or Terra talk about needing hundreds of millions of people working in climate, it's, that includes all these non-climate jobs with the climate lens, as Anshuman was saying, but B, it's also over the next decade plus. And, that sounds like a long time to somebody who's looking for a job today, but it's a pretty short time to go from the relatively small number of people who are even aware of climate careers as an opportunity to that number. And so I think a lot of what this ecosystem is doing is movement building for this wave that we believe is coming, even if we're at the beginning parts of it. There's also just right now at the beginning parts, there's an unevenness of the supply and demand. So I will say, as somebody with I came from the tech industry, I've got a product management background. There are not that many software product management roles available in climate. Trust me, I've looked. There's more today than there were a couple of years ago, but still not that many. Whereas if you have a mechanical engineering background, right, or chemical engineering or aerospace or those types of things, right now there is more demand than there is supply for certain areas, and more supply than there is demand for certain areas. And that will change over time, I think, as the industry overall grows and the scale of the demand grows. But right now, we're in this kind of growing pain stage where the answer can be different for different people with different skill sets.
And then there's a question specifically for you, Jonathan. I'm curious to get your take on this as well, but kind of in the same vein. If you have any examples of areas where there are jobs but not enough applicants, or maybe looking at it, since we're looking at a larger time scale over the next few years or so, where's the largest growth that you kind of see an opportunity? Obviously, not every industry is going to be right for everyone, but for people that are looking for the most opportunity, where maybe those jobs are a little bit more numeral, where would you suggest to look maybe for that?
Well, I think so. I just mentioned a few areas where right now there's probably more demand than supply. A lot of that is because you're slicing things very thinly, right? So, mechanical engineering is still a very broad skill set. So it's, saying, okay, well, we need somebody in mechanical engineering with this particular type of background in this location, at this level. Like you need a pretty big pool to fish from to get to that, especially for these jobs that are on premises rather than remote. But I think I would say, kind of looking forward, skating to where the puck is going to be, I would go back to what Anshuman said about this growth in climate awareness and climate skill set across all these other existing industries, right? And all these other existing functions. And I think that is something that we're already seeing a tipping point, but whether it's in finance, whether it's in corporate governance, software engineering, like Anshuman said, there's I think a big movement in kind of cloud computing is driven by access to power at this point. And there's kind of, it used to be that you built the data centers near where your users were, like next to fiber trunks. And now they're building data centers. Just last week, Amazon effectively acquired a nuclear power plant, to put a data center next to a nuclear power plant, because they're now moving the data centers to where the electricity is available. And so I think there's just a sea change in so many different areas of legacy industries And especially, unfortunately, as we see kind of severe weather and climate adaptation become more of a necessity, that's going to factor into legacy finance, insurance, all of these huge, huge industries that employ hundreds of thousands of people globally are all, they're already starting to be a niche. But I saw something, again, on the data center side where they'd moved kind of sustainability or the energy side of things out of the chief sustainability officer's world into the chief operating officer's world. Because a lot of these things that are thought of as like fringe and core or fringe and ESG are going to become over the next few years are going to become really, really central to the operations of more and more companies. So.
Amazing. Anshuman, do you have anything to add there? Should we move to the next one?
No, I think this is Jonathan covered it well. I just want to share a resource on, and I'm just going to share that in the chat. We actually spent some time trying to figure out where the highest impact jobs are. This is not a supply demand delta. This is more about why you want to work in climate in the first place. We kind of broke it down into 5 tiers of different kinds of companies and roles in there. I'm just posting that in the chat here. Just to take a look at that. There are lots of organizations also mentioned there which are working on at these different tiers. Back to what Jonathan is saying, I think if I have to give you one message on how to think about this is that think not jobs, but think skills. If you have a third of all companies have made not just commitments, net zero commitments, but also science-based targets. So which are like genuine, like stuff that you have to actually think through. What that means is that roughly 20 million people in the US alone will need to have some level of green skills in their existing jobs. So therefore, some of the biggest opportunities are going to come from being where you are and identifying the green skills that you could apply to the specific problems that your organization has. So think of your way of working in climate as opposed to necessarily finding a new job.
100%. Yeah. And I added just in the chat there, the author of that impact report that we put together has an event on Wednesday as part of Climate Career Week, the most impactful climate job. I'm also seeing we'll touch on some of the comments, questions here as well. But we have a climate career coach panel tomorrow. So I have the event to that as well there. Some of the questions on like specifically how to position yourself or like in your resume, get experience or skills across will be answered really well by some experts that directly work in that. I was looking through, there's a couple questions on like skills and sectors and transitioning. And not going into too much depth since the panel tomorrow probably covered a lot, but generally, how do you focus on, or how do you convey skills when you're transitioning from one role into that role in climate? Is there sort of different skills that you should be getting? How do you highlight the ones that you have already? I can probably ask this in a much better way, but maybe that's enough to get the point across.
So I think if I understand the question, if you're going into a role, say you're already a software engineer, and you're looking at a software engineering role in climate, then I think when the climate tech startups that we work with, they want the best software engineers. Obviously, they want they want the best X that they're hiring for. And so I think just you don't necessarily need to be overly worried about your climate knowledge or things like that. We did a panel, I think last year, Climate Career Week, maybe software engineering panel or a different one that we did, where we had a bunch of folks who had come from big tech into software engineers who were now working in climate. And I think one of them said, look, you're going to be working with the climate experts. You're the software engineering expert, right? Like, I think lean into your skills for the role. obviously your commitment to the mission is something that any employer is going to value, but ultimately they're hiring for the best person with the best skills for that role. And that's, you know, that's obviously different if you're trying to transition into a different role in climate, and but still, I think then the answer goes to trying to make the case for your abilities to and how your skills and experience that you had in different roles will be applicable in that role. So it's a little bit the converse of what Anshuman's talking about, which I agree with. Like outside of climate, all of these, all these other jobs, and infusing them with climate knowledge and understanding. When you're coming to a company that's dedicated, climate focus, it's almost like, hey, yeah, we've got enough people who know about climate. We need the skills from outside of climate, and that can be a big appeal to them.
And so like, yeah, if you're that software engineer and you're transitioning to climate, obviously you have your software engineering skills. What sort of climate skills do you think would help, or companies might be looking for, or not? Obviously you don't have to be a climate scientist and a software engineer in order to transition, but is there a foundational base of knowledge that would be useful?
Yeah, go ahead, Anshuman.
No, I think so. I mean, this is exactly the problem that we set up Terra to solve, which is that is there a foundational base of knowledge that we could equip people with to bring climate into their roles. So since this is a very broad-based question, I think I'll probably just narrow it down first and say think from the job to be done framework, which is what's the end problem that needs to be solved. So for example, if you're trying to help yourself or an organization solve a supply chain decarbonization problem, or maybe a scope 3 emissions problem, are everyone's favorite, right? Which is how do we reduce the scope 3 emissions for a large organization? Has control over scope 1 and 2, but is completely at sea when it comes to scope 3. At that time, you have to look at the organization and try to figure out, well, is this a supplier-led problem where we have 10,000 suppliers, maybe even more, that we need to somehow equip with the knowledge and the ability to now start measuring and reducing their emissions footprint? Or is this a materials problem where the sourcing that we do comes from essentially it uses ingredients that lead to massive deforestation? So once you break it down to that level of a problem, the skill that you need are often pretty cross-functional. I mean, in the sense that what you need is kind of a basic understanding of how supply chains work, and within supply chains, what kind of measurement and incentives have worked in the past in terms of case studies. Now that can happen both through search that you do on your own. It could happen through open door climate or Terra kind of communities where we've done this before. And then there are certain specific programs. And Terra, in our case, we are very practitioner focused, which is that our whole modus operandi is Terra.do, so that to get you acting as quickly as possible. The idea is not to just get you learning programs, but to actually have you work in the field as quickly as possible. So therefore, then identify organizations like us, programs like us, because there you have a structured learning environment, and more importantly, a peer community, which is a challenge all across you. So that would be my way of solving for this.
It would help if you could hear me, probably, yeah. One last final question before we go. Networking, let alone transitioning into a new industry, can be very intimidating. You're both super well networked. Jonathan, I think you're probably like one of the most well-networked person in climate. I'd be really curious to hear from both of you how you see the culture in climate as compared to like some other industries. Are people really cold and not willing to talk, or are people generally trying to make the pie bigger and always open to helping other people out? And I guess that's a leading question, but I'll let you take it from there.
Jonathan, if you don't mind, I'll take it first because I do have to jump off in 30 seconds. But this is one of the beautiful things about working in climate, which is that everyone's doors are open. Terra.do climate thing that you saw, you'll be surprised by your hit rate. Just DM people on LinkedIn, on Slack, etc., wherever you find them, and you'll find a very high hit rate of people responding back to you. The other question about being intimidated about networking, I completely agree and relate to that. And I would say this is the one potential solution is to lurk and not network. So join communities like My Climate Journey, Terra, Work on Climate, and just see what the vibe is. And when you find a close space, maybe a private channel, maybe a study group, maybe whatever have you, where you feel comfortable making that first outreach, that's when you kind of go out and do that. So with that, I'll have to sign off. But thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for attempting what you're attempting.
I echo that, and so I know we're all at time, so I think we should use the remaining time to encourage folks to check out the climatecareerweek.org. Oh, thanks for posting that on the channel.
All the more links for us, yeah.
Yeah. Resources, meetups, the rest of the events for this week, and there you go.
And here's tomorrow's schedule. Tomorrow's starting at 9 a.m. We've got a bunch of amazing events. We're starting to break down tomorrow after the morning into more industry-specific events as well. Obviously, we can't cover every single industry out under the sun, but we have some really great experts helping us out for some of them. Those will continue as well into the next day. I believe, Jonathan, what is it? It's the mechanical engineer one, I think is the morning after, right? Feel free to.
It's on Thursday.
It's on Thursday. Sorry. Yeah. So feel free to grab any of those links. You can get the QR code. Just go to climatecareerweek.org. That's where the resource page that we put together lives. That's where you can RSVP to all these other great events. And that about does it for today. So really looking forward to seeing everyone tomorrow. Thank you all for coming out and being a part of Climate Career Week. I can figure out how to end Zoom. There it is.
Thanks, team.